We've met before, haven't we?
I don't think so. Where is it you think we've met?
At your house, don't you remember?
No. No, I don't. Are you sure?
Of course. As a matter of fact, I'm there right now.
That's fucking crazy, man. Hello and welcome back to Lynch Fest and another, or I would say this is actually maybe the first review of a David Lynch film. We had the two-parter on Mulholland Drive, which was more of a rambling discussion, I think. I don't think I would call that in any kind of good faith a review. But this will be, I think, the first proper review, and the second film covered in Lynch Fest 2019, and that is the 1997 film from David Lynch, Lost Highway, starring Bill Pullman and Patricia Arquette. And I feel like I can review this film, even though I feel like it's just as, if not more confusing than Mulholland Drive. Because I feel like Lost Highway doesn't offer enough to how do I put this? It doesn't offer enough to me to truly feel like I need to see it again and again and again to get more and more out of it. I don't feel like this is a film I'll get more and more out of, but I do think it's a film I would watch again. I'd be intrigued to watch again, and I was definitely intrigued. I'd heard Bill Pullman talking about this not on a podcast, and the experience of working with Lynch, and I'm about to watch actually a documentary on David Lynch that largely focuses on the making of this film, which I'll probably cover in a separate video for Lynch Fest as well. But I haven't seen that yet, so I'm purely judging this film based on the film itself, which centers around the character of Fred, played by Bill Pullman, who is a jazz musician. He's a saxophone player who lives in LA with his wife, Renee, played by Patricia Arquette. And the opening section of the film is really this lightly sprinkled tension between this married couple. I felt like, honestly, for the first 10 minutes we were like a split second away from Fred just beating the shit out of Renee. Like, I felt like he was ready to explode at any moment, and there wasn't that much basis for that. He just was playing it so quiet and, you know, borderline suspicious of her, but I wasn't sure how he was going to react. That was kind of almost a little bit unnerving to me. And there's a moment in the film where, at the beginning, where they're having sex, and you know, there's some passion there, but it's not fully. There's something about it that's off. There really is. And when he's finished, he's frustrated, and he's looking at her face, and there's these close-ups on their eyes, and it looked like he was about to snap. And I thought to myself in that very second, I thought, don't do it. You know, as if somehow Lynch could hear me 20 years ago. I was like, keep holding on to this tension, please. And he's there, he's on top of her, and then he comes off and he rolls over, and I was like, yes. And it felt like I was making a directing decision where I was just like, this tension is really good. Don't let it go yet. Like, you can really draw this out more if you wanted to. And ultimately, I don't feel like the tension ever exploded. But for that moment, I felt like it was the right move to make you think it was about to kind of, climax, for want of a better word. But it didn't, So it was slow going at the beginning, but I was really intrigued. And they start receiving these packages outside the house of videotapes, which, instantly dates the film to the 1990s. And the tapes show their house, and eventually the inside of their house while they're sleeping. So they call the police, and they're kind of concerned, and then we get this scene where they go to a party, And Fred is I don't feel like he trusts his wife completely. There's definitely this sense of paranoia from him, which it really just comes from the way he looks. And I've read people pretty much unanimously slight Bill Pullman's performance here. Now I love Bill Pullman, just right on Front Street. I love Bill Pullman. I don't think he's the best actor in the world, but I've always loved him. From the films I saw him in the 90s, like Independence Day, Casper. In Casper, I just felt like I wanted him to be my dad. He was just such a nice character in that film. And then this film, it's really quite different. But I think he underplays it just really, really well. I think he does a really good job in this film. Or maybe I was just projecting something more interesting onto him. I don't know, but I was really like engaged and thought like, he doesn't trust her, and maybe he shouldn't. There's something is not quite, right here. And he goes to get a drink, 2 shots, and he turns around and this guy appears. And he's got this face that is, it's paler than something that's very pale. Like, I don't know, this really pale white face, like this person isn't even alive, with this jet black hair and this kind of split in the middle. And he walks over to Pete with purpose, and the whole scene plays out in a close-up where we see this man, the mystery man, I guess. We see him like this almost. It's like we just see like the eyes, like the forehead isn't really in shot, and it's just an extreme kind of close-up on his face. And whereas Bill Pullman, it's more of a normal kind of close-up, and the sound drops out from the party, just completely drowns out. This is kind of dull hum, I think. And we just hear the words between these two. And he's like, we've met before, haven't we? Pete says, I don't think so. And he's like, yeah, we did. At your house, remember? And he's like, what are you talking about, my house? And he's like, I'm there, right now. And the way that I love this scene. And I love how Bill Pullman plays it. Because I feel like in other hands, this scene would play out where Pete would be like, no, we haven't met before. What the fuck's your problem? Like, you're creeping me out. He kind of plays ball for a little bit, with this guy, and tries to kind of just, not take him too seriously until he's like, what the fuck are you talking about, man? I love the way that he reacts to it. It feels very believable to me. Like, he's a guy who's trying to hold his ground a bit and kind of make it seem like he's not too bothered, but he's, he lets his emotions come out more throughout the scene. And, it's such a creep. The guy who plays this mystery man, it's really quite a memorable performance, and I almost wish his character had been dived into more. I would argue his character doesn't get dived into at all, actually, but I mean, I'd like to have seen more of him. But I think the effectiveness is in how little he does appear, and each scene kind of, when he pops up, it's like, okay, I'm sitting closer to the TV now. He just really captivating look to this guy, and he's sinister in acting cheerful in a way. He's just I'm very pleased to meet you. Like it's really unsettling.
It's been a pleasure talking to you.
And so then Pete goes home and he's kind of paranoid, and he ends up being sent to prison for something that he doesn't believe that he did. And it's up to you to think, did he do it? Did he not do it? He goes to jail. He gets put on death row. And then the film changes completely, and we tell a different story. It's David Lynch's Death Proof. It's like, okay, now all those characters are gone. Let's do something else. But I completely misread, I think, what you're supposed to be seeing in this film. It was only when the film had finished and I was reading some reviews on Letterboxd, I thought, oh, okay. I didn't look at it like that. It was really intriguing, and I don't know whether to dive into spoilers or not. I guess I'll leave that till a section at the end of the video. But the second part of the film, I was finding it hard to adjust to because I missed Bill Pullman's character and everything, and Patricia Arquette's character and everything. And we focus on a young mechanic called it's gone. Adam? Pete? Wait, Pete is the Bill Pullman character. Okay, I looked it up, and Pete is the mechanic. I think I've been calling Bill Pullman's character Pete when it's Fred. Maybe I've just been blending it over. But okay, it doesn't really matter. Bill Pullman, his character name is Fred, and the mechanic is called Pete. So Pete is a young mechanic, as I just said. Sorry, I got really confused there by the name switches. He is trying to adjust to something that's happened to him that's quite traumatic and kind of repressed, I think, and he's not quite sure how to deal with it, and he's just trying to get along with his day-to-day life. And there's a few interesting, I would say, cameos in the film, and it was in fact, I think, Richard Pryor's final performance in the film. He plays the guy who runs the auto shop, and there's a really funny scene where he's speaking to a guy on the phone about well, I'll leave it to you to watch the. It's a really funny little mini Richard Pryor moment, which I really enjoyed. And I think Richard Pryor died not long after this, a few years after this. So, and you could tell he was kind of, I don't know, in later years, if you want to say. And also Jack Nance, who is a David Lynch OG. He started in with the Razorhead. He's the focal character of that film, and then of course Twin Peaks. I love Jack Nance. There's something about him, and he has a couple of scenes in the film, not too many, but it was really nice to see him, and it was his final role with David Lynch, maybe even his final role altogether. I'm not too sure about that one. But that was nice. There's a few little kind of, that actor. Marilyn Manson has a cameo in the film at the end for a few seconds, and that was like, huh, okay. But Pete, the mechanic, has this interesting relationship with Mr. Eddie, this kind of mob boss. He seems like he's a mob boss. He's this guy who rolls in. I love his theme song, which is really over the top by Badalamenti. Like, it's this really kind of dun, 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 like it's a proper 40s kind of villain theme, but I love it. It's so over the top and brilliant. I just really enjoy it. He rolls up in his car, and he's got this kind of special relationship with Pete, where he trusts this young kid to kind of fix his car up and stuff, and takes him for a ride. And you can tell that he's got his sights set on this young guy to kind of maybe join his team at one point. He's really treating him well and everything. He's like, you're my guy, Pete. And they go for a drive up in the Hollywood Hills. Hilarious sequence where he gets tailgated, and Mr. Eddie, he kind of motions for the guy to overtake him, and the guy drives past. He's like, sticks his finger up. And Mr. Eddie's guys in the back just get their seatbelts up, and Mr. Eddie just hits the just zooms out there, smashes into his car, runs it off the road. The Dimension is played by Robert Loggia, and he smashes the window. I think one of his men smashes the window of the guy who was tailgating him, rips him out of the car with it, smashing him in the face with his gun. And he's like, and it is an amazing sequence of telling someone exactly what you want to tell them. I equate this scene in Lost Highway to anyone who's ever been slighted by anyone in public, where someone has been so rude to you and you just want to grab them by the fucking scruff of their neck and just tell them exactly what they're doing wrong. Because that could, again, very easily be a scene where he runs the guy off the road and shoots him in the leg, or kind of, brutalizes him. I mean, he beats him up, but he doesn't do anything too extreme. It's just this outburst of do you have any fucking idea how many feet you're supposed to, he's kind of telling him what he should have done, why he shouldn't have done that, and he's like, you should read the fucking driver's manual, motherfucker. He goes so over the top,
I want you to get a fucking driver's manual. I want you to study that motherfucker. And I want you to obey the goddamn rules. 50 fucking thousand people were killed on the highway last year because of fucking assholes like you.
And I just thought it was hilarious. And working in retail in the past, there's certainly moments where you get to your final rag with people, and you just wish you could just grab them and just fucking explode. And it's like the ultimate wish fulfillment of that kind of scenario where someone's being so rude to you, and you get to tell them everything, and you get to tell it in a really satisfying way with lots of fucks, and it's just brilliant. Robert Loggia was phenomenal in that scene, and I really like him in the film as well. He delivers more of a sinister and subdued performance in other parts of the film, but that was just a really funny outburst that was hilarious to me. And I actually just showed Connie that scene on its own because it was so funny. So Pete gets involved with Mr. Eddie's woman, also played by Patricia Arquette. This woman is called Alice. Now, most of us should know Patricia Arquette as a blonde, as she appears in life and in most films that she does. The beginning of the film with Fred, Bill Pullman. Renee has red hair, I believe, or dark brown. A little bit colorblind, but it's, you know, it's dark, you know. So we then get the contrast of seeing her play a blonde in Alice, who's this woman who has a lot of baggage because she's involved with this mob boss. And this young mechanic gets seduced by her in a way, and they have this very passionate affair. And that's what the film becomes about. And there's a lot of nudity that involved, there's a lot of sex scenes. Nothing too graphic, but it's definitely dwelled on. The sexuality in this film is very heavy. And I think that plays into perhaps the beginning of the film and, you know, Fred, Bill Pullman's distrust of his wife and, you know, worrying that she's, you know, sleeping with someone behind his back. And maybe that's kind of informing how the rest of the film plays out with this young Pete character. And at first I thought Pete might have been a younger version of Fred, and we might be seeing like a prequel within the film itself. But then certain things don't really match up with that when the film splits into the second story, I think. So I wasn't too sure. Special shout out to Gary Busey. Gary Busey, like I never heard anyone praising Gary Busey's acting. I thought he was fucking great in this film. He plays the mechanic, Pete's dad. You know, the mother doesn't get too much to do, I don't think, but I just thought he gave such a, I don't know, I mean, it's not an overtly impressive performance, for sure, but I just thought he really felt like a caring father, you know? I totally believe that he was concerned for his son, and, you know, the incident that Pete has gone through, which you only see in flash frames, really, it's this kind of thing no one's talking about. And one night Pete comes home and his parents are like, you know, they're not sure what to say to him, and he's like, tell me what happened. And he's like, oh God, and the way Gary Busey's talking about it, like he's like, I can't say, you know. And I thought he was great in the film. I mean, he's not a very big role, but phenomenal supporting performance from Gary Busey. Well, I don't know, I've never really been that impressed by Gary Busey. I've enjoyed him in films very much, but I've never really appreciated him as a good actor. I thought he did a great job in this movie. I admittedly enjoyed the whole affair of Pete and Alice on a superficial level, I think. I mean, I enjoyed it as on the level of what's going to happen to these characters. They're doing something they shouldn't. And this kind of looming presence of Mr. Eddie and how sinister he could get. You know, there's a great scene. He comes into the auto shop and says to Pete, he's like, you know, you've seen my girl around here, haven't you, Alice, before? Yeah, pretty girl. And he pulls out this massive gun. He's like, do you know what I'd do if I ever heard anyone was getting with her behind my back? You know, I'd take this gun, I'd stick it so far up their ass. You know, like, he does it in this joking way that is so fucking, like, you know, threatening. Brilliant. I thought Robert Loggia's great in the film. I really enjoyed this film, but I feel like I'm rambling a bit too much now, but overall, it didn't quite pan out for me. I didn't love it as much as I would have liked. I liked elements of it, but the whole picture, perhaps not so much, compared to other Lynch films, I think. But yeah, so on a superficial level, I really enjoyed the Pete and Alice affair. I think Patricia Arquette is a fairly sexy and attractive woman, so that certainly plays into it. But to be honest, there was a certain, how do I put it? How do I put this now? This is interesting. There's a defining feature of Patricia Arquette, a certain part of her that's kind of unique physically, that really reminded me of someone who I had quite a thing for in my youth. And so it took me back to my youth, and it was almost like this kind of fantasy I was getting lost in. Like, what if I'd got to do that with that girl and have this kind of wild, you know, affair and everything. So, you know, hands up, you know, guilty as charged. I totally got dragged into that part, and I could see myself enjoying watching that part of the film again, purely from a kind of, you know, fantasy kind of point. Not even in a point where I was getting aroused by it, but just like the, oh, that would have been nice, you know, that would have been exciting or whatever. So there we go. There's your total honesty for you in this video. But I did enjoy like I said, the threat of Mr. Eddie finding out. And there's this fucking brilliant scene where he phones up. The more I'm talking about it, the more I like this film, actually. I think I should be rating it higher than I did. is when Mr. Eddie calls up Pete, and he's like, "You all right, Pete? Are you okay?" And at this point, Pete knows that Mr. Eddie knows that he's been sleeping with his girl, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm okay." And he's like, "Oh, I just wanted to know that you're okay. You know, I'm really glad to know that you're okay." Like, oh, I love the way that it's not obvious, but it's completely obvious. Like, they both know what's going on. None of them are saying it, and he's intimidating him by saying almost the complete opposite thing, and it's fucking brilliant. And then you get to the end of the film, and there's a bit of a revelation there. Some of the visuals are quite interesting. The whole film is scored with... I didn't really notice Badalamenti's music, actually, as much as I did in Mulholland Drive, for example, or, of course, Twin Peaks, where his music is, I think, so central to that show and the films. But with Lost Highway, I didn't notice his score as much, but the music, Bowie opens up the film with just a shot going down a highway at night. We have Rammstein, we have Marilyn Manson. It's very kind of its time, late 90s, early 2000s, kind of that style of music, which was really jarring and out of place, I think, but at the same time, it kind of went along with kind of the vibe of where the film was going, which was very unexpected a lot of the time. David Lynch has described the film as a psychogenic fugue, or a fugue state, which you can read into in a lot of different ways. So I'll leave it there for Lost Highway. I'll admit, having talked about the film now, I think that I really loved a lot of the first story and the second story. Where I kind of fall on it is the switch between the two, and the way the film ends, the last 5 minutes, just really not too sure. But again, when the switch happens, I was thinking something completely different, which I'll talk about in just a second. But overall, Lost Highway, I enjoyed it quite a bit. I think there's some really fucking unsettling stuff in it. And I enjoyed the parts more than the whole, I think, overall. So there we go. That's my thoughts on Lost Highway. And now I'll get into some quick spoilers. So, the split happens when Fred goes to prison, death row, for the murder of his wife, Renee. Cuts her up into pieces, horrific. And there's a scene where you see like the video footage of him with her body, and it cuts to like an actual film frame of him with the body and blood everywhere, but it's really quick and you don't really see much. And I thought, I could go back on the Blu-ray and look at everything if I wanted to, but I didn't. I refrained from that because that's the way you would have been like, oh, what was that? When you first saw the film in the cinema. So I decided not to kind of freeze frame it in that moment. And also, I don't like grim stuff like that anyway, but I thought I could look at that if I wanted to, but I didn't. So he goes to death row, and then one night, he looks out, he's going through problems with his head, he looks out, and kind of the side of his cell kind of just opens up, and he sees this cabin, and the mystery man. The next morning, there's someone completely different in the cell, and it's Pete, the young mechanic, and he doesn't know what's happened to him. He gets these flashbacks of a car maybe hitting him, and he's not sure what's happened, and there's, it's a mystery around what happened to him, how he ended up there. I thought that Bill Pullman's character, Fred, had been taken from that cell, and this young kid, this young mechanic, Pete, had been put inside the cell by this mystery man. I never for a second considered that Pete was Fred, or that Fred had turned into Pete. So the whole time I'm seeing the mechanic storyline and Pete's kind of affair with Alice, I'm thinking, where's Fred? Where's Bill Pullman? Is he going to turn up halfway through? Where is he? And it kind of was him all along, and he turns back into himself at the end, and you got to kind of decipher what that means, and who is Alice? There is a moment in that sequence of affairs where, Pete is sleeping with Alice, and she's got this, blonde hair, but at one point she doesn't have blonde hair, and it's never really addressed again. Maybe that's kind of like a hint, I suppose. One thing I think, now that I think about it, that I didn't like about the film was the fade in and fade out. Almost every scene fades in, fades out, and it almost feels like lazy storytelling, where it's like, okay, that's the end of that scene, then we'll just start again on this one. I like it when a film flows very naturally, like nice cuts to the next scene. And there was even like an establishing shot of like the landscape before going to a scene, and then that same establishing shot was used again like a minute later. It just felt like it was being reused. I didn't like that. So some of the fade outs just felt, I don't like fade out storytelling really. I always feel more aware of it being like fragmented scenes. Well, they're not fragmented. I guess you could say in this film it's kind of fragmented, but in general, I'm not a fan of fading out stuff. I don't know. That's just my own hang-up, I suppose, on certain things. So I didn't enjoy that aspect, but that's kind of like an editing thing, I suppose. And well, it's not even editing; it's just the way that you're presenting the story visually. And I enjoy films more when there's not really a lot of fade-outs, and there's a lot of them in this film. It almost feels a little bit like, okay, I'm done with that idea, now we'll start fresh with another scene, and I don't know, that was just one thing. But that's not really a big criticism, to be honest with you. And at the end, you know, he drives off, the police chase him, and we get kind of the bookend of the film, where at the beginning he wakes up and he gets a call on his intercom saying this man, Dick Laurent, is dead. And apparently I read Lynch got a call on his intercom saying Dick Laurent is dead. And that was it. Like, it's just really fucking chilling. And they tie that back to the end of the film when Fred turns up at his own house and puts the intercom and says Dick Laurent is dead. And then the police chase him and he goes off onto the highway, and that's the end of the film, and the music plays. So I don't know. I mean, I've read a comment about it being likened to a Mobius strip. And again, like Mulholland Drive, you could look at that and say, well, that's just a way to explain the fact that your film doesn't make too much sense, and you're just kind of like, well, it's like a Mobius strip, you know, it's like the same thing, it just keeps going. I don't know. But I enjoyed the parts so much more than I enjoyed the whole, I think, and especially like the last 20 minutes. But I did really like a lot of this film in superficial ways, but also in you know, very, you know, the way I like to enjoy films ways. That was a terrible way to put it, and I'll keep it in just to remind myself that I certainly don't know what I'm talking about most of the time. But Lost Highway, I would be intrigued to check it out again. I thought the Mystery Man, just a very captivating, compelling performance. Love Robert Loggia. I thought Patricia Arquette was really good, you know, and I liked what you can read into with her character in the film, and I thought that Gary Busey was really good. The guy who played the mechanic, Pete, served his purpose. You know, I like Bill Pullman a lot. You know, it's a lot I like about the film. But overall, I would say... No, actually, I would say I enjoy this more than Eraserhead, actually. It's not my least favourite Lynch film, but I think Eraserhead is a lot more accomplished as a piece of art, and a lot more singular and unique. But, you know, yes, so some of the music that dated it a little bit, and I'm not too into that whole Marilyn Manson style of music, and it's blaring throughout a lot of the film, so I wasn't too keen on that and the fading out and stuff. But I did love that tension in the beginning of the film, and I loved I did love the mechanic storyline quite a bit, and the affair, and where it goes, perhaps not so much in the last 15 minutes. It was a bit too, I don't know, not to my liking, I suppose. But anyway, Lost Highway, it isn't a completely lost cause. You know, I did enjoy quite a bit of it, and now I'm just repeating myself, so I'll leave it there. Thank you for watching. If you've seen the film, definitely let me know your thoughts down below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video in Lynchfest 2019.